Alright, so this is part one of my two-part videos on how to deal with conflict, aka conflict management. And the two videos, the first one's going to be about the don'ts, the things you don't do when you're trying to deal with conflict management. And the second video is going to be the do's, things you should focus on. I think the do's are a lot more important, but the don'ts are not equally as important, but they're still pretty important. It's something you need to know, but not something you should focus on per se. So what I would say is, per se, what I say per se. So the point being is that I would say go ahead and focus on the do's more than the don'ts, because the don'ts aren't as important, but there's something you need to know so that you can tell when your tendency is shifting in that direction and when you need to switch your mentality to focus on the positive aspects of how to deal with conflict and get better at it, I guess. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into those 5 things to not do when a conflict arises between you and someone else. And number 1, the first thing is not to assume the other person's heart or intent behind their action in the conflict. One of the worst things you can do is assume that you understand another person's side of a problem without actually talking to them about it. And number 2 is to assume that they know your situation or point of view in the argument as well. If you want to assume that someone else understands your side of the story, you're going to start assuming things about them, like that they did it on purpose, or that this was intentional, or that they did this to hurt you. It makes everything in a conflict seem way worse than it actually is. So you don't want to just assume that they understand you, where you're coming from, how difficult things have been for you, or whatever it is that you're going through, because it's going to then turn on you and cause you to start thinking things about them that are honestly and probably just not true. It's just not a good thing. Don't assume that. And now we're going to move on to number 3. Number 3 is to assume their maturity and ability to handle the situation. I think one of the biggest problems that people have is that we tend to assume that it's the other person's responsibility, or even that they have the maturity level to come to us to deal with the problem, when in fact it should be us who are stepping up to take the high road and to go to them to deal with the issue. So in that, we cannot assume that they're going to be able to have the maturity or the viewpoint or to be in the position to be able to come to us with the problem. Instead, we need to go to them. Okay? So these first 3 are pretty basic. It's the do not assumes of conflict management. You cannot assume the other person's intent or heart behind the thing. You can't assume that they understand your point of view or what you've been through. And you also can't assume that they have the ability or the maturity to handle this situation, which then puts you in the position to be the mature one, to take the high road and actually handle the issue appropriately, which we'll get into in my next video, so stay tuned and then watch that one. This one's over. And moving on to number 4, you can't let the situation sit for too long. Now, I think there is a tact in giving it time to settle, giving yourself time to process through it, giving them time to process through it, to kind of make sense of the whole thing. But on the other hand, you can't let it sit for too long, otherwise your heart and their heart are going to start callousing about the issue, and we're not really going to be able to honestly handle the situation without lashing out in anger most of the time, or other emotions that we don't intend, and or saying things that we don't mean that actually just make the situation worse. So there's definitely a tact to this. Like, you don't want to wait too long, you don't want to do it too quickly. You got to find this nice happy medium that actually brings you to the most opportune moment, and that's really what you're looking for, is trying to hit that sweet spot so that you and the other person have both had time to process through it, but haven't calloused yourself so you can deal with the issue and actually come out of it in a positive way. And that brings us to number 5, which is you cannot step into one of these conflict situations with anger. Like, that is way bad. That is not a good idea. That is the biggest and best thing you need to set aside, is any anger you have towards that other person. Because the thing is if you fail to listen to all these steps, you're probably going to end up going into the situation angry, and that's just going to cause more conflict. That's when you do say the things you don't mean, and when more problems come up, and you just make the situation worse. It is much healthier to take a step back, go into it understanding that they have their own issues and their own problems, find out where you're at, and to think about everything that's been going on. So to summarize, you can't step into this assuming any of these other things about them at all. You can't assume their heart behind the situation. You can't assume they know or understand your point of view or perspective. You definitely shouldn't assume they have the maturity to handle the situation from there and come to you. And you can't go into it too quickly or take too long getting into it. You gotta find that sweet spot, and you finally can't get mad or allow yourself to go into the conflict resolution situation angry. If you stay away from these 5 things, you're a lot more likely to have positive and constructive conflict management, as opposed to people who step into these things without these mentalities, and also please, 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 just have the desire to make the situation better. If your heart's behind making things better, resolving the conflict and growing through it, you're gonna be way more likely to come out of this in a positive way than anyone else with almost any other mentality. And that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you liked anything about it, got anything out of it at all, please hit the like button. That lets me know that what I'm making, producing, and building here is positive and encouraging to you. And also, if you have any questions, concerns, you disagree with part of this, or you want me to talk about something more deeply, please comment below, direct message me, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram or something, and let's start a dialogue about it, because there's definitely more that I probably missed and stuff that we could go deeper on, because that's what I want this to be. I want us to be able to have good dialogue with these videos so that we can grow and mature and learn, become better people together, because that's really kind of the point of what I want to do. And I think if you do all these things, we're going to build a solid, positive, growing community here on this channel and become better people together. So join us, hit the subscribe button, become part of this group, interact with us, and let's build a positive, growing community together. And so to my friends, my family, and everyone who's watching these videos, that's all that I have for you. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time. Peace out, homies.